Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatirons Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatironstuning.com and stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.
Well, Brian, I do want to touch on one other thing, and this is a can of worms.
Oh, gosh.
But I'm going to go there because this is one of the main reasons I wanted to kind of bring on one of the topics to talk about, because it's just becoming so common. And then we will finally let you get back to playing with crazy wiring. And that is, because you talked about it earlier, is all these different engines from Japan. And there's specifically two of them, which is the EJ20X and EJ20Y. That we can talk about it.
No, we should. We honestly should. We honestly should. And the reason is that I know for our experience, and then a number of other shops and tuners are getting this call probably
all the time
day. So what has become super prevalent in the JDM importing has come over as the EJ. I don't even know where the 20XY came from. I'm not even sure, other than it like says it on like the front of the block. I'm not sure Subaru actually references them as this, but
I think
whatever.
They did, yeah.
So at least we're all on the same page. So the 20XY it came out of like 05-ish to like maybe 08, maybe 10
I think it's actually 03 to in 04, Japanese 04. Number. Yeah, it's 03 to 2008. Yeah.
Somewhere in that ballpark. But anyways, you can easily identify it because they have plastic intake manifolds like our 08 WRX, 05 Legacy GT. Yep. It looks similar to that, but the difference is that I think a bunch of them have the low mount. Some of them have that low mount turbo, which is kind of cool. But they're all
that's the Y,
the Y, which is the later one, and they're twin scroll, and they have the big thing is they have dual AVCS.
And it's the first dual AVCS EJ engine.
Yep, absolutely. So,
and in this case, being the first doesn't mean it's the best.
No, and it's not. and to the point, it's not bad. I think I think the problem comes to the point I was trying to make earlier is know what you're buying before you buy it. Do your research. Don't just buy it because it was cheap or an importer said it would fit. Remember, importers are just trying to sell you something.
And this is the problem. And this is, and in fact, we've had conversations about this before we had this conversation. Yeah. And that was like, all right, we've got to try and have a conversation about this and get it out there so that we can try and kind of get better information out there for people, because the underlying part of it, what's happening with these engines is that people are advertising or saying it can fit all of these cars, crazy amount of cars. You have a 2002 WRX, it's a direct bolt, and you have an 08 WRX, it's a direct bolt, and you have any kind of Legacy GT back to 1997. It's a direct bolt in for your Legacy.
It's a direct bolt for your SVX, I swear.
Yeah, and but it isn't. And on top of that, like there's a lot of differences of this engine because it was like this first dual AVCS engine. Subaru tried a lot of different stuff with it. And like I said, in and of itself, it's not a bad engine, and you can do cool stuff with them. But you've got to know what all these differences are, and you've got to know that it's not going to be plug and play. It's not simple, and it's not something where like they're advertised so much as being like, oh, it's an $800 pull-out engine that's got like 35,000 miles on it.
Magically work.
Yeah. And it's unfortunately it's a lot of these people that get in a pinch, and like I've talked to so many people that like usually a lot of times it's their kid's car that has an engine failure, and I can get this $800 engine off eBay, and it's a direct bolt-in from Japan, and that'll get us running again. But they get it, they start trying to put it in, and it's just a nightmare.
Yeah, and so I think we need to talk about why that is the case. So I think there's a crossover here from the wiring lens to the mechanical lens. So from a wiring perspective, these cars are dual AVCS. So just so we're clear, we're talking about adjustable cam timing, and dual means intake and exhaust because they come in pairs. Sometimes people call it quad because there's 4 of them, but you wouldn't have a right AVCS and not have a left AVCS. Right. So we refer to a single intake only or dual intake and exhaust. These engines are all dual AVCS. And unfortunately here in the US, our only dual AVCS platforms are 08 plus STI. And I think maybe one Legacy. Yeah, there might be like one Legacy that had it. Because didn't we get like 2010 with like one version of low mount turbo?
There's single AVCS.
Oh, there's still single AVCS. So
that's another crazy unicorn. But it's kind of cool, but it's actually not nearly as bad as the 20X and 20Y.
Yes. So we have a dual AVCS problem because we don't have it here. And unless you're planning on putting one in your 08 plus STI, you're going to have it to deal with the exhaust side AVCS. So generally, if you go to my engine blew up, what do I replace it with? Assuming you find a compatible long block. So number one thing you're looking for is cam position sensors. That is everything, is cam position sensors. So assuming that you have a compatible platform, which would be pretty much any drive-by-wire turbo platform here in the US, theoretically a 20XY could fit in it, because you would put your original intake manifold and harness onto the 20XY long block, so that your original computer and all your parts will plug right into it, and it will run.
But you have to have
an
the
exhaust
US
side
spec
problem.
cams. Well, and you have to have the US spec cams.
And to the point, from a wiring perspective, I don't have a solution for that. The only thing that could be done is that if you could get and certainly it's an option if you really wanted it, but is to buy a standalone ECU like a Haltech. Let's say you had an 07 STI and you wanted this, or 07 WRX and you wanted this, you can buy a plug and play Haltech that you could add in the exhaust side AVCS. That is an option. But given the world we live in, standalone ECUs, that's a whole nother topic we can talk about another time. But the reality is, for most people, a standalone ECU is going to be too expensive and not legal. So for most people,
not something you can drive on the street.
Right. You can't. You can't reasonably drive it on the street. So for most people, it's not likely an option. So
well,
what
Brian,
do you do?
even on these cam position sensors, if I'm remembering right, this is the one, like the 20X and Y, it's a 3-wire connector, and all the US spec are 2, or is it the other way around?
So intake side, we're all 3. 16-bit platform, so 02 to 05 WRX, JDM 01 to 05 WRX, JDM 01 to 05, or 06, I should say, STI. Those are all 2-wire cam position sensors, which is why they're really compatible with our 02 to 05 WRX. So if you have 02 to 05 WRX, definitely look at a 205, 207, early 2000s, because those are great options, basically plug and play. When you get to the 32-bit platforms, they are 3-wire cam position sensors. And remember, 2 and 3-wire cam position sensors are not interchangeable. ECUs do not know what to do with them. You cannot mod them. I have seen people put in the 3-wire cams in the 2-wire cam slots. You drill out the hole, which
they don't fit. They don't even fit.
They don't fit. So you're talking thousands, and that has to be static. And then you also swept the cam shaft itself, which now you've lost some of the appeal of the JDM engine. So don't do that. But in terms of the exhaust side AVCS, because I don't have a solution for exhaust side AVCS, if your car didn't come with one, this is where the problem lies. And this is where you see tuners pretty much on a daily basis on Facebook griping about this, because they're getting calls all the time and they're saying, look, because I don't have the exhaust side set up properly, I really can't tune this thing because it's not going to do what you want and you're going to be mad at me. So from a mechanical perspective, that's why I reach out to guys like you and say, what is your solution? Let's say you did it. What is your ideal solution?
But even then, like, even AVCS aside, there's other issues with this engine. Like, if already you're spooked,
a mechanical lens that I don't have. I love it.
If already you're spooked, like there's more.
So
wait. The biggest one is, which catches people out, is this is also a very early twin scroll turbo. So Subaru used completely different design for the twin scroll turbo for these engines.
Right.
So the turbo is unique. The header that leads to the turbo is unique, and the downpipe is unique. So basically, the only turbo that fits a 2X or 2Y twin scroll is that turbo. There's no aftermarket option. All the headers are unique, so you can only run the factory turbo on these headers. So like there's 2 significantly different twin scrolls.
Yeah, now you've really opened up a can of worms, because now if you want standard options, now you're putting your old turbo back on it.
Or then what we've so the STI twin scroll, that's what we commonly use. And if anybody's doing a stock location twin scroll swap, that's typically the architecture they're using. So like if you're looking at an aftermarket twin scroll header and stuff, it's on the STI architecture, not this legacy architecture.
Right.
So then, like, let's say, yes, you can bolt your stock manifold, you can convert it back to a standard scroll turbo.
So plugs in and runs. I mean, that's what I always tell people, it'll run.
So then the last key piece here is that the tuning and the way that Subaru built this engine to run is a lot different than a lot of the US spec cars in that it's a very high compression engine. So that engine from the factory was 9.5 to 1. And the way that Subaru tuned the car and designed it to run was like with a lot different timing protocols. And we had Keith from 969 Performance on, and he kind of alluded to some of this in that conversation where we were just specifically talking about twin scrolls.
Sure.
But it's a very different engine. And like a lot of times in Japan, they have access to, I think it's 100 octane at the pump, whereas we don't.
Essentially, yeah.
So basically, think about like an engine in Japan, they have to run premium, but to them, that's 100 octane.
Right.
Here, the best we get is like 91, maybe 93 if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
So like, let's say you get everything installed, you figure out the exhaust AVCS problem, and everything is now ready to be tuned and running, but you have pump gas and you have 9-to-1 compression on this engine. All of a sudden, like your power is much lower because it's so much easier to detonate because of that compression.
Yeah. And to the point, like that we tell people anytime they're putting in a different engine than they put in, but especially when they're putting in JDM engine, this kind of goes back to the 02 to 05 WRX swaps. Like you must tune for the fuel you're going to give it, because anytime you put in a JDM ECU, especially, or JDM engine that is designed around higher octane, what we have access to here is so different that it's not going to run right. And
and it's dangerous. This is why you don't put like 87 or 85 octane in your turbocharged Subaru.
Same idea. Yeah, it's the same thing. We tell people all the time when they do, because we do a lot of like version 7 through 9 swaps, like JDM STI. And I tell them, before you tune it for the octane that you're going to give it, do yourself a favor and go throw like a tank of 100 in it to see what it can do.
Right.
Because I mean, people complain about our tuning over here, but our like base map tuning from Subaru, that's because the fuel we have is essentially junk.
It's way
compared to what they get in Japan. They'll be like, wow, the car runs so much better on my Japanese ECU. It's like, because it has good fuel and they can tune for that. You don't have the same restrictions that we have here in that regard.
Yeah.
But coming back to your tuning issue, that's a serious problem that at minimum, to get it running and driving appropriately, you would have to do some sort of tuning.
Right.
And nobody wants to tune it.
And here's the last gotcha. There's basically no parts interchangeability with a lot of the key components of that engine with anything that we had over here. So like those intake AVCS solenoids, totally different. I think actually that the pulleys are the same, but a lot of the gaskets are different. A lot of just the standard gaskets on the engine are different. So then all of a sudden, like, oh, I just need the solenoids. Like I can get them, but I have to order them. They're like 2 to 4 weeks out, and they're going to cost double or triple what the US spec part would be. And so like it's a problem.
So now in terms of that though, the exhaust side AVCS piece of it, right? So if you do nothing with the exhaust side AVCS, my understanding is that because it doesn't have the oil control valve doing its job on the exhaust side, it's going to oscillate with the changes in pressure, which isn't going to blow it up, but is not good. Do you guys have a solution that you recommend to say, okay, let's say I'm going through the 20XY.
Yeah.
I want to make it right as I can. What would I do?
Put in a non-AVCS cam.
Okay.
So if you put in, so pretty much, and we've worked with 2 people that have done this, and it's been a while, and I've heard back from both of them, and they said that it works. So I'm pretty confident that this solution worked.
Yeah. All
of the EJ cams have basically the same fitment. So this is like the start of this thought was, well, you can put STI cams in non-AVCS WRX heads, and it all works.
Sure.
Now you have to deal with the oil flow openings in the cams where applicable. But if you're removing AVCS, that's not a factor. So you put the non-AVCS cam on the exhaust side. But you have to leave the solenoid in place because the solenoid is the key oil flow path for the front cam journal.
Right. Otherwise, it'll just basically cut the end of the cam off.
You're gonna have serious problems then.
Yeah, actually, the first person that I know that tried this years ago actually was Harvey, and so he did that, and basically the cam seized in the head. Because it didn't have any oil flow.
I saw. We were hunting around of this recently, somewhat recently, and I actually found somebody on Naziok that like homemade like a replacement part. Like eliminate it, but to keep the oil passage open. And I was like, wow,
it was a little block that had like somehow duplicated the oil pathways, but without the solenoid. Yeah. I do recall that, but it's been a while.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I was looking at something pretty old.
If you've got the solenoid, the easiest thing to do is just leave it in there. But so everything has to be there so that the oil has the path to feed the cam. But then you just run it non-AVCS and with a non-AVCS cam gear.
Yeah.
And then the timing seems to work out. I have seen more reference of late to people where they're leaving the AVCS pulleys on.
Okay.
And just like you say, I mean, way early on, there was a couple of guys locally that tried that, and what the problem they were having is that the cam phasing would drift.
Yeah, which makes sense.
So like in an AVCS car, you have a cam position sensor on each cam, and that's watching the advance and retard of the cam phasing to make sure it's exactly in sync. Now, if you have no ECU to look at that, and you also have no control of how the oil is getting into the heads and stuff, then either cam can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Now the theory goes, to the best of my understanding, the theory goes that as long as you have oil pressure and you're letting the oil pressure into, like, so with no current, there's both solenoids are in the default position, so the pressure should be the same.
Theoretically.
In theory. But like, so there is a spring to kind of preload it, and so in theory, with the oil pressure and the preload spring, it shouldn't drift.
Sure.
But it might, and again, like you're applying a decent amount of force with the timing to get to rotate, so you can't be 100% certain that valve timing is going to be consistent.
That's I thought there was like a lockout pin inside the AVCS gears when it didn't have pressure, because the exhaust cam only retards like 15 degrees too, right?
I don't. That sounds actually a little bit more. I don't know if it's that much. Yeah, but
15 is not that much.
This is where
when you look at the cam, it'd be really sleepy cam if it was off like 10, 15 degrees, base center line.
Yeah. The best answer that I can give without having like done a lot of extensive testing is putting the non-AVCS cam gears on it. It's fixed. You know that it's fixed, and especially a non-AVCS cam gear on a non-AVCS cam, you know that the orientation position of those two things work together. Because that's the other problem. If you put non-AVCS cam gears on an AVCS cam, that basically the resting position of the cam, the advance is off.
Yeah.
And so basically you're sitting at the high RPM overlap versus the low RPM overlap, and so you lose all your low end.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I've heard from people that have had it. It's just as a dog down low. Which makes sense if that's the case.
Yeah. So
I mean, you look at the aftermarket cams too. You look at like the AVCS and their non-AVCS counterpart, and there's usually like 10 or 15 degree difference on base centerline. So you're starting off already like super, retard, and it's not going to be happy on the low end at all.
Right. Right. And then I saw somebody was commenting, I want to say maybe it was if they didn't swap the cam shafts and cam gears, that you can sort of manually set the exhaust side timing a couple teeth to kind of set it.
Oh yeah, so it's like 7 degrees per belt, like per tooth is 7
like 3
degrees.
or 4 teeth or something.
Well, I would imagine 2 teeth at the most, because that's 14 degrees. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, and so like, when you're talking about teeth on the timing belt, it's a very fixed jump. Like your unit of change is 1 tooth, and that's it.
Which is 7 degrees. Yeah.
So like, if you're going to play around with that, like you could, I would like, so Dustin actually indexed an engine.
That was the recommendation that I saw. So that's why I want to ask you guys about it, so people would have a more educated answer. Because like I said, that's just not mine.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, indexing an engine to make sure that that's right, because you could totally do that, and you could even like fine tune it with eccentric,
an adjustable gear.
Or
the eccentric pulleys.
Yeah.
But you could fine tune it, get it really close. But indexing an engine, it takes a lot of time. So like when I had that EJ20X and I had to run it for Superlap a couple years ago, I spent 5 hours indexing that engine to make sure everything was perfect.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what I had, and this was a junkyard engine, and how the story goes. But so if somebody's out there like, oh, Ryan Dussix and Brian at iWire said we just jump 3 teeth and we're good.
No, yeah, it's like no.
Just index it. It's fine.
Absolutely not. That's why I've heard a number of people say that, and from people I reasonably would expect they know what they're talking about as well.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it could work, but I wouldn't trust it to work without the first time I would try it, measuring the indexing of the cam gears to make sure that it is actually within.
You're concerned about a DIYer's reliability of doing that, especially. And then I think it would still present the problem of the cams adjusting based on oil pressure. It wouldn't solve that either. You could still have oscillation.
With this, I think it's when they're putting on the non-AVCS cam gear. But if you're doing that with the AVCS employees, so there's gear, you could do this idea in both scenarios. You'd be better off doing this with the non-AVCS cam and cam gear to ensure that you're not getting the oscillation. You could do it with the stock cam gear to get the timing advance set right. But you might lose it because of the oscillation. Oscillation. Yeah. It's one of those. It's one of those things where I think people have gone backed into a corner with these things because there have been people that I've talked to that it fits. It's all that I need. It's $800, and they put it in the car. Like there's one guy that I was talking to locally that it was in the car. They were able to get it to kind of start, but it wouldn't exactly idle. And that's the point that they were at. Like what happened?
Interesting. Yeah. I would expect that it would fire up and run. I don't know how well, assuming they were using all of their original wiring and engine, their intake manifold, harness, injectors, all that stuff, assuming that they did that.
The problem in this case was they had no cam position sensor attached.
That would be
now. Then that was where it kind of spiraled. It was like, there's 2 cam position sensors on the back of these heads. Mine was a single. I think it was a 2-liter WRX where they had a single cam position sensor up front.
Yep.
And it would kind of fire, but not really. It would stumble.
Because it doesn't have cam input.
And then it was this whole thing of what did you do? Well, no, I took the engine and I put it in the car. It bolted right into the car. Those engine mounts.
It up. It's an EJ. It's 2 liters.
Yeah, and then the clutch went in. I mean, I'm ready to go, but it just won't start. So what should I do? I'm like, oh man,
this is the
you're in a spot
scenario.
Yeah,
especially in that application. I mean, that's
that's why I wanted to have this conversation because it's this is happening a lot.
Yeah, and every day. I see it like I said, and I'm sure every shop and tuner can attest to this right now.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things I don't fault people for buying it. The importer said that it would work, but comes back to know what you're buying. That, you need to understand, yes, you can make this engine work, but is it the right thing to do? Maybe not. I don't really deal in absolutes because everybody has there's a place for everything.
I'll tell you, there was one guy locally that he knew exactly what he was doing and getting into, and he loved these engines.
Yeah.
Because he was running E85 all the time.
Yeah.
He was converting them to non-AVCS all around the board.
All around, yeah.
And basically he could make, because of the compression, and he's running E85, so it has really high knock resistance and stuff. He was having a blast with these things, and I think he ran 3 of them because he would one would finally pop, and he's like, $800. Let's do it all over.
Perfect. Do it again. Yeah.
If you know what you're doing and you know what you're getting into, can it work? Can it be done? The answer is yes, but you've got to know all of these pieces.
If you're looking for a basic replacement, spend another $700.
Yeah.
To get one that is more appropriate for your application. And I want to mention the exception to the rule because as Whitney, my wife, who's awesome and has joined us a few years ago and been a huge part in how we've gotten where we are now. I'm sure John's talked about it a number of times.
Yep.
Is you need to know what you're buying, and because Subarus feel like it should be the same every time, she calls it catching smoke. Because just when you think you have it, it disappears.
Yeah.
And the exception to the rule here is the Legacy GT. 2005 and 2006.
Yeah.
If you buy a 20X, I think would be the way to refer to this. Basically, the earlier model that has 2-wire exhaust side cam position sensors.
Okay.
you can put in the equivalent JDM ECU in this car because the CAN protocols are the same because they're basic.
Because it's the same chassis.
Same chassis, basically. And so but you must deal with the immobilizer. There's a couple ways people are doing it. I haven't done it personally, but I know a couple people as such swapped out the like EEPROM, the basic chip for the immobilizer. Okay. And I know other people have some other ways of potentially programming it. I've not done any of them, so don't ask me how to do it. I'm just saying that that's what people have done.
That's a Baywire situation.
That's a
Baywire. Yes, UWire. That should be our new name. Usually it's iWire, so you don't have to. But then we actually sell an exhaust side ADCS wiring harness for that specific application. But anytime somebody calls me about that, I will not sell it to them until the car is running and driving on the JDM ECU first.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure that their scenario is correct. They're going to be able to complete the project, and then I give them the little piece that works at the end.
Okay.
Because I don't want to sell you a custom harness that is specific for this application that you can't do anything with and you can't return it if you're not going to go through the process. It comes back to the transparency. I could absolutely throw it your way, and then you'll never get it to work because you couldn't figure out how to get the immobilizer working. You never could find the JDM ECU. Whatever. Those are all. So when people call about that, we do it, but it is specifically 2005, 2006 Legacy GT manuals.
Right.
And now I want to go buy one. There's got to be a blown up one here somewhere, right?
I'm sure there is.
What's funny is I didn't know that piece of the puzzle, but now all of a sudden, like that's why I bet you that's why there's so much misinformation about this. Like it worked in this very specific set of scenarios.
It works in a 2-year car. Yep.
This is the fault of Subaru people because so many things are interchangeable. It's like, well, if it fits there, it fits everything.
This is everything. We recently got a new puppy, and with dogs, they don't generalize. You have to train them every single time a new person comes in the room, starts all over.
Yeah.
We as Subaru people probably are like dogs in that we can't generalize.
Yeah. Got to start over.
We have to restart, and we need to learn how to restart in this case for each scenario because a 2005 and 2006 Legacy is so different than a 2007 and 2008 Legacy.
Completely.
Because I have seen people do it because you can technically put in the 07 and 08 JDM equivalent ECUs in those cars with the 3-wire exhaust side cam. But the problem is the CAN system from JDM cars and the US at that point breaks off.
Okay.
So you can put it in there, the engine will run, but those 07 and 08s, a lot of them have SI drive. Doesn't work.
Yeah.
You lose a bunch of other features like BDC because the Japanese equivalent cars they broke free from the US in terms of their CAN features. So you can't do it unless you were dead set on dual ADCS and would be willing to ignore all else.
And honestly, it's not that much of a benefit to make all of that extra worth it unless there's some other factor, like you wanted the high compression, like you knew specifically, I really want a high compression engine. I really specifically want a high compression 2-liter engine.
Yes.
And then and I don't know why but that's what you want. That is an option. I mean,
everybody has, people call me all the time and say, I would love to do an 05 STI swap, but I really hate 257s because of ringline failure. I want a version 7.
Right.
Fine.
Sure.
You have your opinion. I disagree because we live in the US and I think we need the extra liter of half liter of displacement because we have crappy fuel. But
America.
Yeah, America. But to each their own. I don't have a problem with that. It just comes back to that sort of idea of that's why I don't function in absolutes.
Thanks for tuning in. To hear the whole conversation, click below for the full episode of this podcast or tune in every week on iTunes or Spotify. If you like these episodes, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel because your support is what makes all of this possible. As always, this show is brought to you by Flatirons Tuning, your premier source for any Subaru OEM or aftermarket parts. Check out our website at flatirons.tuning.com, and as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.